Okay, so welcome everyone to today's session. We are very excited to be talking about State Department fellowships today, in particular, focusing on our Pickering and Rangel fellowships, which are the oldest of our fellowship offerings. So we're really excited to be able to bring you several alumni of these programs and to be able to talk to you about this incredible opportunity, which is open now for folks to apply. And so what we will do is go over sort of a number of things, and I'll introduce myself in just a moment, but I'll just briefly talk about the flow of events so you know how this session will proceed, and then we'll go into some introductions and some information. So at the beginning, we will talk about what are these fellowships? What do the Pickering and Rangel fellowships offer? What do they entail? What do you need for eligibility? Things like that. We'll also be talking about some tips for competitive applications. We'll also be talking with two alumni of these programs, the current about to be second tour Rangel Fellow and about to be second tour Pickering Fellow who are with us. And then we also have someone from Howard University who administers the Pickering and the Rangel programs, who can talk to us a bit as well about tips on competitive applications and answer any of your application related questions. And so at the end of all that, then we'll open it up for Q&A. So backtracking a bit, my name is Antoinette Hurtado. I am the State Department Diplomat in Residence for the Southwest region, covering Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. I hope there's some representation from those three states here, and welcome. What is a diplomat in residence? We are regional recruiters. There are 16 of us nationwide covering different regions of the United States, and we are here as a local resource for you. You want to talk about careers, talk about student programs. We're here to sort of help demystify all of these things and help you see what could be a good fit for you. I am a Foreign Service officer. I've been in the Foreign Service for 18 years. I myself am a Pickering Fellow as well from way back in the day. I joined the State Department as a Pickering Fellow. I've served overseas in Australia, Brazil, Afghanistan, Italy, some Washington, D.C. assignments, and then now in the Southwest, doing this incredible work of working with students and young professionals to join the State Department. So I'm really excited. And then also I will turn it over to my co-host today, Mignon Houston, also a diplomat in residence, to go over a little bit of housekeeping before we get started with the information. Mignon, over to you.
Thank you, Antoinette, and welcome to everyone joining us for this exciting virtual information session on the Pickering and Rangel fellowships. Today, I want to just briefly go over a few housekeeping tips. I would like to ask, since this is a virtual session, if you can turn your cameras on. We'd love to see your faces, to connect with you virtually, and please do so. We are recording the session, as you can see, and so we will have this information session recorded and hopefully placed on our careers.state.gov platform in case you want to see it later on. I also would like to ask that as you are thinking about your questions while you're watching the PowerPoint slides, please just hold off on adding your questions in the chat until we complete all of the PowerPoint presentations. That way, in case we answer your question during the course of the presentation, you don't have to go back and submit a second comment in the chat. So just hold off on the questions and we're happy to get to them. Our idea is that after we complete the PowerPoint slides, we'll then open it up to our panelists. Our panelists will share their experience, and then we'll have questions from you. We'll take some quick questions from the chat, and even if we have time, we'll look at taking a few questions live and asking you to just do the hand feature, and we'll call on you. So those are our quick housekeeping tips, and we look forward to continuing the program. Back over to you, Antoinette.
Thank you. Okay, so Pickering and Rangel fellowships, everything you wanted to know, hopefully. Let's go ahead and start to dive into that. So next slide, please. This year, we are really excited to be talking about these programs. We are excited every year to be talking about these programs, but in particular this year, because it's a huge anniversary year for our fellowships. The Pickering program is in its 30th anniversary year as the oldest one. Woo woo, that's what I am. That's what our other co-host is, and that's what one of our panelists is. The Rangel Fellowship is in its 20th anniversary year. One of our panelists is the Rangel as well, so we're really happy to have her. And then just so you're aware, we do actually have one other fellowship program that's exclusively for IT majors called the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. Is in its 5th anniversary year. And coming soon, a totally new 4th fellowship option that should be online and available for application in just a couple of weeks, the Diplomatic Security Fellowship. This will be for those who are interested in joining the Foreign Service as diplomatic security special agents. So that is also another option that we're excited to be bringing on board. So lots of anniversaries to celebrate this year, lots of incredible work and incredible people who joined the State Department through these programs over the years. A very quick note on our fellowships overall. First, they are all career pipelines. So what does that mean? That means that everyone who is successful as a fellowship applicant will join the Foreign Service. There is a job waiting for you at the end of your studies to join the Foreign Service. And so this is for folks who know that this is what they want to do for their career, who are really interested in this lifestyle, in this career, and in this opportunity. They all have several common elements. They each pay for 2 years of education, for example. They each have 2 paid summer internships, 1 domestic, 1 overseas. They all offer professional development. They all offer you the opportunity to join the State Department afterwards. And then they all involve a 5-year service commitment as well. There are a couple of differences here and there with majors and with which actual career you join in, but they all offer sort of financially something that's very similar. So just a quick update on sort of what the latest and greatest of our fellowship offerings are. All right, so now let's go ahead and get into the Pickering and the Rangel Fellowship specifically. That's what we're going to focus on in today's session. So if we could have the next slide. What do they offer? So the Pickering and the Rangel Fellowships, they each offer or select 45 fellows each year per program. So this year, there will be 45 Pickering fellows and 45 Rangel fellows. They offer up to $42,000 annually for a combination of things: tuition, room and board, books, mandatory fees. You can see a bit of the breakdown of how that goes there. As I mentioned, they also offer 2 paid summer internships, with the first internship being in Washington, D.C., and the second internship being overseas at a U.S. embassy or consulate. They also offer an orientation program, not only an orientation to the program, so you know what to expect, but also to the State Department, so giving you a kind of firsthand look at what to expect with your career down the line. Professional development is a huge component of this as well. You get assigned a mentor, you have networking opportunities, and the network of the Pickering and Rangel Fellows itself is also very strong, as I'm sure all of my fellow alumni can attest to. And then you join the Foreign Service as what's called a Foreign Service Officer or Foreign Service Officer Generalist at the end of your studies. You do have the 5-year service commitment. So in exchange for all of the above bullet points, you are asked to serve in the State Department for at least 5 years. Now, I'll just note the little asterisk at the bottom. These 2 programs are essentially identical with only 2 minor differences. So if you are interested in one, we always suggest just go ahead and apply to both. The application process is the same. It's no extra essay. Just be sure to switch out Pickering with Rangel or vice versa in your materials, but we definitely encourage you to apply to both. The only real difference is where the summer domestic internship is where and when the summer domestic internship takes place. For the Rangel Fellows, the domestic internship takes place on Capitol Hill, and it takes place the summer before you start your graduate studies. For Pickering Fellows, they do their Washington internship at the State Department, and that takes place in the summer between the 1st and 2nd year of grad school. So moving on to eligibility. 3 sort of basic things to be eligible to apply. You do have to have US citizenship. This is the case for all of our careers, for all of our fellowships, our internships, for all of our careers and student programs. And you'll see some links in the chat that my colleagues are sharing to direct you to some of this information. You do have to be a US citizen at the time of application. Doesn't matter if you were born in the States or you naturalized, you just have to have citizenship by the time you apply. You also have to have a cumulative GPA of at least 3.2. And you need to be starting your 2-year master's degree in fall of 2023. So either being a current senior right now or a recent graduate who has decided that they're ready to move on to their master's degree and ready for a career in the Foreign Service. You do have to be pursuing a master's degree that is related to the Foreign Service. So you see that little asterisk there. Those are just a couple of examples on the screen on what could be considered related to the Foreign Service, but our work is truly so broad and touches almost every topic that many additional majors could qualify here. And a quick note again, we mentioned these are both open for application now. The deadline for the Rangel application is coming up soon on September 22nd. The deadline for the Pickering is coming up on September 29th. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. What's involved in the application? Pretty standard, and you can find this information online. personal statement, 600 words or less. This is not an academic essay. This is a short and sweet description of why you want to pursue this opportunity. Statement of financial need, because this program is for those who do have a financial need and would need assistance with a master's education. You also need 2 letters of recommendation, that proof of citizenship, transcripts, other financial documents. And then if you do make it to the finalist round, each program will choose 90 finalists and then eventually narrow it down to those 45 fellows. If you make it to that finalist round, you'll also have a panel interview and a timed writing exercise. I did want to make note too of just the websites for the Pickering Fellowship and the Rangel program at the bottom, as well as the emails to contact for any of those kind of specific questions you might have. Next slide, please. What makes a strong candidate? I'm not going to go over this in depth because all of this you can find on the website. I am just going to, and it's fairly intuitive, a commitment to public service, interest in going overseas and interest in foreign languages, these sorts of things. I want to be, representing the United States as a diplomat. The only thing I do want to highlight here is what I put in the asterisk, because this is relatively new. As some of you may know, as a Foreign Service officer, we are generalists, so we are going to be working on a number of issues across our career, but we are expected to choose one of 5 career tracks: political, economic, public diplomacy, management, or consular. We are especially looking for those who have an interest in management, economic, and consular work. So those backgrounds could be things like a major in economics, a major in social work, a major in the sciences. Of course, your traditional IR, public policy, global studies, and things like that. That's also welcome, but we are looking for folks who have other majors outside of those traditional majors as well. And of course, this program, both of these programs encourage those who have been historically underrepresented in the Foreign Service and in the State Department to apply. So whether that is minority groups, women, or those with financial needs, or all of the above, we definitely encourage those folks to apply. And then moving on to the next slide. Here, I will turn it over to my co-host Mignon to talk a bit about how to prepare a competitive application.
Thank you, Antoinette. Everyone, my name is Mignon Houston. As Antoinette mentioned, I'm also a diplomat and resident covering the region of Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. I have served in Latin America, in Guadalajara, Mexico, in Central Africa, in Yaoundé, Cameroon, in South Africa, in Cape Town, as well as in Manila, Philippines. I've also had a couple of domestic assignments, and I am currently working as a recruiter. So it's been about 16 years in the Department of State, and it's been a beautiful, beautiful career. I also joined as a Thomas R. Pickering Fellow. And so this is why for Antoinette and I, it is so important that we share these tips on how to ensure your application is strong. We also want to encourage you to really think about the words from our panelists today and think about how they really not only built their communication around their objectives and their accomplishments, but really how they delivered it in their statements. So we're going to begin now. We see a couple of questions in the chat. I see that we have some great interns that are responding, but if we're not getting to you right now, it's because we're going to hold off and answer the questions from the chat after the PowerPoint slides. So I'll move to the next slide. Perfect. At the Department of State, when we are looking to hire individuals as Foreign Service officers, as civil service officers, we are looking for a number of character traits. And these are items that we are looking for in your applications and in your personal statements. So I want to begin by just discussing what we call the 13 dimensions, which are the characteristics that we deem necessary to be successful in the Foreign Service. When you think about these 13 dimensions, I want you to write them down, place them under your pillow, tape them on your wall. These are the characteristic traits that you want to make sure you showcase in your application. Let's go through them quickly. Composure. Do you have experiences in your professional or academic background where you have demonstrated your ability to remain composed and just mindful and thoughtful in very stressful situations? Cultural adaptability. Have you had experience working across cultures in a harmonious manner, even when those cultures may be different from your political views, your religious views, your social views? Experience and motivation. Your applications should identify your long history, as long as it can be at this age, right? Your long history of really being committed to pursue a career in public service, particularly when it relates to global affairs. So when we're looking at your application and reading your personal statement, we are looking to see that your previous experience all adds up to show that this is something that you've really been wanting to do. Those applications stand out because we see someone who's committed. This is, of course, a very competitive career. Both the Pickering and Rangel are competitive fellowships. And for that reason, applicants stand out when they show that this is something they've been motivated to do, and they've been really committed to public service through all of their internships, their study abroad programs, their volunteer activities. Information integration and analysis. What do we mean by that? We're looking for individuals who have shown that they can sort of draw from different resources and discern what's appropriate. Can you attend a meeting, listen to what's being said at the meeting without taking notes, and come back and report to your boss about what happened in that meeting? Because that's something that you might have to do as a US diplomat. We are often given loads of information, and at very little notice, we need to really integrate that information, assess what's most important and most valuable, and report out or send a cable or write out to Washington about what's going on. So if you've done some of that in your history, you definitely want to make sure you mention that. We're looking for your initiative and your leadership. We're looking for folks, you might not have been the president of an organization or the vice president of an organization. That's okay. We don't need those titles. What we're looking for is your impact and your leadership while you were in that club or that organization or in that volunteer capacity. And what do I mean by that? I often have individuals who say, well, I was teaching English in Japan. Does that count as leadership? That's a great example. But really what I'd like to hear is, while I was teaching English in Japan, 50% of my learners went on to pass a very critical English language test. And now 10% are teaching English themselves. That is a completely different level of impact and leadership. So think about your examples and think about, how do I pull out those stories, those scenarios where I had real impact, where I helped my organization grow or advance or achieve their objectives. Judgment. We're looking for individuals who can discern what's appropriate. Once again, you're getting a lot of information at one time in very short bits of time. You have to report on that information. Do you have the proper judgment to make good decisions about what information is necessary and needed? If you have this background, if you've done something like this before, you really want to make sure you articulate that in an impactful way in your personal statements. Objectivity and integrity. In the Foreign Service, like in most jobs, we're really looking for folks who can avoid favoritism and bias and come to a conclusion based on a fair decision. If you have demonstrated this in your past, you want to articulate this as well, because this is an important characteristic for the Foreign Service. Oral communication. If you don't notice anything else during this virtual presentation, you will notice how our speakers communicate. This is such a valuable tool in the Foreign Service. Not only are we communicating in English, but we're also communicating in a multitude of different languages. And so we want to ensure that our communication is concise, that it's clear, that we're able to persuade, that we're able to negotiate. And if you have these experiences doing just this, then you definitely want to talk about it. And it doesn't need to be anything on a grand scale. You don't have to say that you had a virtual session with 300 people that you led at one time, but you can have multiple opportunities to speak to people in an open forum. Maybe it's Facebook Live, maybe it's having a conversation and leading a group discussion for several sessions. Maybe it's talking in front of your class and then moving that conversation to the dean's office. How did your communication help impact a group or change the decision or the direction of a plan? We really want to see that impact in your communication as well. Planning and organizing. This is a huge trait because most of our work is really synthesizing information and strategically taking steps to move forward and accomplish an objective. Can you plan accordingly? Can you look at deadlines and ensure that things and tasks get done? How are your organization skills? Are they strategic? And so these are some of the things we're also going to be looking for. The 13 dimensions, all of these dimensions are explained on our careers.state.gov website. And I really encourage each of you to take a look at each of the dimensions deeply, understand them, and think about how you have demonstrated them. Going to quantitative analysis. Here we're really looking at how do you draw on conclusions and recognize patterns in information. If you've been working for an organization and you noticed, the past couple of Fridays, there's been a dip in the restaurant attendance. Maybe you're working in a family restaurant. And based on that, you sort of gathering research analysis and started looking at sort of what was going on in the community during those times, during those dates, during the timeframes when there was a dip in participation and attendance. And you came up with a plan to really change that and to change the menu or change some of your marketing materials. And based on your efforts, now as a result, you have more folks coming in and attending the restaurant on those Fridays. So this is an analysis example that doesn't require you to be overseas, speaking a foreign language, or working in an embassy. It really is something that you can show right at home that you have these resources and these skills. Resourcefulness. Are you flexible? Are you able to change direction based on what's going on? Does it frustrate you to have to change your plans or completely stop your plans? Antoinette and the ladies on this panel who are joining me, we've all been in situations abroad where we are going in one direction and then the ambassador comes in and we have to change course. And so we want to make sure that you're comfortable with that. And not only are we going to see this in your written products, like your personal statement, but if you get a chance to have an interview for Pickering and Rangel, this is some of the things that will be asked of you too about your examples in each of these 13 dimensions. How well do you work with others? Would others say that you're positive to work with, that you help bring something to the team? If you think about working in an embassy in a foreign country, particularly in some of the embassies that we've worked in, I worked in Cameroon, small contingent of American staff. And so that means we're all very close, working on ways to build global partnerships in this Central African country. We work together often, we're in small teams often. I would want people to say, I really enjoy working with Mignon. I would invite her to the next embassy to work with me. And this is what we want to hear about your ability to work with others. And written communication, exceptionally important. Can you write in an organized, grammatically correct, and concise manner? We're also writing fairly quickly. We're turning around reports in a quick manner. And the only advice I ever got about really writing well is the only way to do it is to do it. Right? You have to write often. You have to do a lot of public speaking to get good at it. And so I would recommend for each of these 13 dimensions that you read the descriptions under each. You write down an example of how you have demonstrated each of these 13 dimensions in your professional or academic career. And if you find there are a few dimensions that you're really strong on, but some where you haven't had as much experience, then take some time in the next couple of weeks. If you're applying right now for the Pickering and Rangel, if you've got some time and you're applying the next year, and really focus on those dimensions where you might need some more time and attention. Next slide, please. Now I'll just share a few application tips that come from a variety of sources, some just speaking to colleagues, others from the website for the Pickering and Rangel Fellowships. They also include some application tips. And so we'll start with this statement of interest. For both the Pickering and the Rangel, they're looking to hear a little bit about you and your background. And in this statement of interest, there are a couple of things that we sort of look for. One, we like to know that you understand the job and the position and the fellowship that you're applying for. It makes sense for you to research about the work of a Foreign Service officer, the type of work that you might be doing based on the cone, whether you're a political officer or a consular officer or management officer, and think about the experiences you've had in your background that would support and complement your ability to serve in that cone. This is how you can strengthen your personal statement. We also, as mentioned before, we want to hear about your motivation. You want to demonstrate your commitment and perseverance to pursue a career in public service. We also, in addition to complimenting the department, what we see often is personal statements, as Antoinette mentioned, are very short, 600 words, right? And in this time, you do not have time to talk about your theory on globalization, or the South China Sea, or what's going on with the war in Ukraine. We are excited that you understand it and you can really articulate that and you've studied it, but this personal statement is really about you and your impact and what you bring to the table. So if you find yourself giving descriptions about foreign policy, just cut out that non-essential information, remove it so you can bring in some sentences that would really showcase your impact and leadership. That impact word, I can't overstated enough. We are really looking to see how you've made a difference. How has your time at an organization or with a club or in your community really shown that it was valuable, that it was necessary? And so you want to pull out those examples and think about them that way. Include your service and your professional awards if they make sense, and address all the requirements in the personal statement. The personal statement might have several questions. Can you answer this, this, and this? read through your personal statement response and ensure that you have actually answered all three and that it's clear that you've answered all three. You might even want to incorporate the words in the statement to make sure that it's clear that you answered it, because what you don't want to do is not follow the instructions in the application itself. Next slide. The next slide is about the financial need statement. So this is also a statement that we get lots of questions about. How do you articulate your financial need or your circumstances? And there's so many ways to do this. For Antoinette and I, it could have just been our backgrounds. I came from parents who were middle school and high school teachers. I had a sister. I did not want to have my parents pay for graduate school. And I had years of studying abroad and learning languages and wanting to serve globally. And so the Pickering Fellowship was the best way for me to be able to do so. And so we really want to hear why this is so important for you. It could be that you attended a community college first so that you could save money. It could be that your parents were working multiple jobs and you had to work multiple jobs, or that you were able to do some extra work, tutoring or mentoring, so you could gain some extra money. Whatever it is that you can use to talk about your financial background and your circumstances, please bring that in, because that is important for us to understand you and your needs. If you're from an underrepresented group, not only is that based on your sort of ethnic group or your religious background, it also could be about your geographic background. Maybe you're from a rural town, a rural area. Maybe you are part of an underrepresented group based on some other traits. So just make sure that you include that, because that's important for us to know as well. Your financial needs statement. Oftentimes these statements can be very unorganized. You've got lots of thoughts going on in there. You want to keep it clean. You want to make sure it's polished, that each sentence is tight, even in the financial needs statement. So don't spend more time on the personal statement than you do on the financial needs statement. Once again, demonstrating that commitment to public service, even in the financial needs statement, and address all the requirements. Next slide. All right. This time, what I'd like to do is use backgrounds of two successful candidates. One, Brenda, who is a Thomas R. Pickering Fellow from Miami, and the second will be a Charles Rangel Fellow. What I like to do here is just read a little bit about Brenda's background so you can hear how she articulates her accomplishments and what she's done. Brenda is originally from Miami, Florida. She's a graduate of Georgetown University and the Honors College at Miami-Dade College. So if you're not familiar with Florida, like Camila and I, Miami-Dade College is a community college. So this is where Brenda started. Brenda obtained her bachelor's in foreign service, a concentration in international history, and a certification in religion, ethics, and world affairs. As an undergraduate student, she interned at the U.S. House of Representatives, the International Rescue Committee, the Immigrant Resource Center, and the U.S. Embassy in Tunis. So Brenda already has shown that she has a commitment to global service. She's had lots of internships. We don't know if they were paid, if they were unpaid, how long she interned. We know that she spent time with these offices. In addition, Brenda facilitated creative programming events virtually. What does that show me already? That shows me that Brenda got initiative and leadership. We know that she's had some organizational skills. If she's facilitating programs, most likely public speaking as well. What would be great is if Brenda had said, Brenda facilitated over 100 programming events virtually and probably touched an audience of 15,000 people. That's even better. So use those numbers when you can. This is Brenda's bio, not her application for the Pickering Fellowship. I'm just using that as an example, but make sure you include those numbers if you have them. She's currently a Princeton in Africa Fellow with the International Livestock Research Institute. So once again, just really showing Brenda's commitment to global affairs. Next slide. This next slide is of a Rangel Fellow, Nicholas. Nicholas is from Alabama. He graduated in May 2021 from Morehouse College, where he majored in international studies and minored in economics. During his undergraduate studies, he interned at the Liberian Consulate in Georgia. He studied abroad in London. Outside of the classroom, he was a member of his school's speech and debate team. So what are we seeing here? He's got some commitment. He's been abroad, but he's also part of his school's communications speech team. It doesn't say he's president, he was a member, but that shows that he's taken some initiative to to really just focus on his communication skills. And he's participated in multiple Model United Nations conferences. He studied Spanish and Mandarin. He's interested in the consular and public diplomacy career tracks in the Foreign Service. And in the fall, Nicholas will join the School of International Service at American University. So you can see Nicholas and Brenda were both successful based on their backgrounds with these two fellowships. They are not slouches like Zena and Camila. They are very accomplished. These are the folks that you are going to be going up against when you submit that application. So really think about, what have I done? What experience do I have to bring to the table? Have I shown my commitment? Have I shown those 13 dimensions? And can I articulate that when I'm writing about myself? Next slide. So that's really what we have right now on our current tips. At this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Antoinette to continue the program with our panelists.
Thank you all. Right. Pam, if we can stop the screen share for the slides, we'll go ahead and get into a conversation with our two panelists who are with us today. So I will go ahead and now ask Zena and Camila to introduce themselves. Let's start, because you're on my left here, Zena, if you would start first, and then Camila, if you could introduce yourself briefly, and we'll start and ask you some questions afterwards.
Hi, everybody. My name is Zinda Senbetta. I'm from Wheaton, Illinois, a suburb outside of Chicago. I did my undergrad in sociology at Princeton University, and I did grad school at Georgetown University, where I studied global politics and security. I completed my first tour in the Foreign Service in Manila, Philippines, where I worked in the consular career track. But my next tour will be in Saudi Arabia, where I'll be doing public affairs work. Very happy to be here.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Camila Mansueta. I am originally from Miami, Florida, and I attended Florida International University Honors College. Shout out to any Panthers if you guys are out there. I got my my bachelor's degree in international relations and political science, and then I went on to do my master's degree at Columbia University. And I received a master's in Latin American studies. My first tour was in Kingston, Jamaica, and I, like Zena, was also in the consular section. But my next post will actually be in Tel Aviv, Israel. So right now I'm actually at our Foreign Service Institute learning Hebrew. And I will also be working in our public affairs section. Looking forward to answering any of your questions, and very happy to be here.
Thank you both. And that's just a plug as well, that the State Department does teach you the language that you need to know. Both of my colleagues here were in or are currently in language training. So that is a part of what they will offer you. All right, so the first question for my esteemed panelists here: how did you come to this fellowship? What was your path to the fellowship in the State Department? Where were you coming from, and what did you think, what was the difference that this fellowship was going to make in your life, or what difference did it make? If you want to kind of think retrospectively on that a bit. So your path to this fellowship, how did you come to the fellowship and to the State Department? Let's see, Camila, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I would say my path was a little more non-traditional. So while I did study international relations and political science, the thing that I actually focused on the most in my undergraduate studies was music. So before doing my undergraduate work, I was actually a concert pianist and an opera singer. I knew that I wanted to serve. And so I chose to study international relations and political science, but I always kind of kept that music on the side. So I ended up forming the very first a cappella group for FIU, which also ended up really being the only a cappella group in the United States that is majority Latinos. And through that platform, I was also even able to arrange our group not only singing in English, but singing in Spanish, right? So I guess one of my tips, I'll bring it up pretty early on, is to find your story and sell it. For me, my story was music is a universal language. And when you put in that music and that culture, that's also a very big part of what we do as diplomats. Learning to assimilate to that culture, respecting that culture, you know, really living in the culture is what we have to do. And so I would say the difference, my goodness, I am a first generation student. Neither of my parents went to college or graduated. My brother graduated right before me, but both of us were pretty much in the dark about, what to do, where to go. And personally, I didn't know what a diplomat was until I went to undergrad. I didn't. And I much less did not know that I could be one. So thankfully at FIU, Mignon is there now, but our previous diplomat in residence, Catherine Rodriguez, was one and is still one of my main mentors. And she helped me see that, especially as someone who wanted to serve in any capacity, I wanted to serve my country, and I knew that. She gave me those tools and those vessels to, apply for the Pickering Fellowship, go through the whole application process, interview process. And I would say it's definitely changed my life. I wouldn't think that at 25 years old, I would have already lived in another country by myself, have a master's degree, but also, have financial stability enough to go home and see my parents and, buy Christmas presents for my sisters. It really, people don't think that it makes a difference on a granular level. But to me, it's made the world of the difference. And I think when you look at the State Department, and, Antoinette can also attest to this, there's not a lot of Latino representation in the State Department. And so for me, I see myself as a difference. I want other people that apply to see me and say, hey, she looks like me. I belong there. And so that's what the fellowship has done for me.
Amen, amen to that. Fabulous. Thank you so much, Camila. Zina, please, you want to share your story of how you came to the fellowship?
Sure. Yeah. So my first step was actually doing what you guys are all doing now. There was an info session at my university. I didn't really know anything about the Foreign Service or the State Department, but I was curious. So I came, I got that initial information, and it sounded great. Foreign Service officers talking about their career, learning languages, traveling, getting a new environment and a new job every 2 to 3 years. It all sounded very exciting. So after that initial session, I ended up doing an internship for the State Department over the summer. And during that time, I was able to speak with some Rangel and Pickering fellows and hear about their experiences. And so that's sort of what ultimately motivated me to apply. So I was a sociology major. I had not really taken international affairs courses. I think, some people are like, oh my gosh, there's a certain, type of person that is a diplomat, but really I've seen in my colleagues, people really do. And like Camila was saying with her background in music, people come from all types of backgrounds. And so that was also kind of what drew me to it even more, to work and be with people of various backgrounds, professionally and otherwise. My father is actually an immigrant. He became a citizen. He's from Ethiopia. So I guess the impact, or thinking about what this work has meant to me, it's just very humbling knowing that when I was in Manila, I was doing visa work. And at some point, my father and a lot of my family members went through that process. And to be kind of on the other side and representing America and doing all of that work was really powerful. Also, I knew I was interested in graduate school, but I definitely could not have afforded it if it was not for the fellowship. So that's another huge thing that I'll be grateful for, forever, that I was able to pursue my graduate studies and go on to this awesome career.
Thank you, both of you. And I'll just add on to their comments there, because so much of what they said resonated with me as well. My siblings and I were first generation too. My parents didn't go to college. They had high school education only. None of this, same as Camila, I didn't know what a diplomat was. I didn't really know what the State Department was, except for what I read in history books in high school. It wasn't until college when, sort of full 360 in my current role now, a recruiter came to my campus and talked to me about the State Department, talked to me about the Pickering Fellowship. And I thought, oh my gosh, I get paid to travel the world and I can finally go and see all these amazing places that I've only dreamed of. And I can bring, my family along for the ride and open up their world and their eyes to things too. Yes, how amazing. And just because Camila brought it up, I'm going to mention that there are a number of financial benefits to the Foreign Service in general, not just the financial benefits that the Pickering and the Rangel Fellowship afford you, which are ginormous, but just one, for example, the biggest financial benefit, at least for me, is that when you are living overseas, your housing is paid for. So housing typically, right, is the biggest expense for all of us each month, mortgage or rent, whatever it might be. And so imagine being several years overseas in a tour and multiple tours throughout your career, not having to have that expense. If you're anything like me, when I joined the Foreign Service, I had a car loan, I had some credit card debt, I had some student loans still just from the part before what kicked in when Pickering and Rangel Fellowship paid for it. And because I didn't have to pay rent in my first tour, I was able to pay all of those off in my first tour. So it really sets you up for that financial stability that for so many of us, we were not familiar with sort of growing up, or our parents, were not familiar with that. So wonderful, wonderful answers and stories. Thank you, ladies. Mignon, I turn it over to you for the next question.
Absolutely. And now I have to share my story because everybody has been so inspiring. I am not first generation African American. My parents have all gone to historically Black colleges, my aunts and uncles. I attended a historically Black college, and I thought I was going to be a news reporter. I was studying another language. I was working abroad in different.
Oh, sorry, Mignon, we just lost you for just a brief moment there.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. I was just saying that undergrad, I was a mass communications and Spanish major. I thought I wanted to be an international news reporter. And I had a professor ask me, did
Kirian le había dicho que Mando había muerto, entonces que dice que ella había estado enfermo y que mamá le dijo, pero Kirian.
There we go. I had a professor who asked me, did I want to make the news or did I want to report it? And I thought, well, I can do both. And at that time, he said, you really need to think about it. Do you want to be someone making the news, or do you want to be someone writing about it? And you should think based on your interests in global affairs and languages, think about a career in diplomacy. And he told me about the Pickering Fellowship. So I really thank my HBCU for giving me that opportunity. But I also want to just really give a huge shout out to both Camila and Zena. I can attest to Camila's greatness and her talent, because when I was serving at the U.S. Embassy and U.S. Consulate in Cape Town, South Africa, Camila was our intern there, and she was phenomenal. I mean, there are programs that Camila started just as an intern that we're still doing today in South Africa. And so just a huge kudos to her and to her talent, and to Zena, who I've never met prior to today, but if she served in the U.S. Embassy in Manila, that is no small feat. That's one of our largest visa missions in not only Southeast Asia, but in the world. And so just kudos to her for even going to Manila and taking on all of that work that it requires to be in the Philippines. So my next question really I really want to go back to this idea of the application process. For both of you, you were, like you said, you were coming in not as international relations majors, not as political science majors. How did you prepare yourself for this application to be competitive? I know, Camila, you mentioned sharing your story, but could you talk a little bit about maybe the interview process for you and what that looked like when you were applying?
I can start out for this one. So I think the number one thing, which was already kind of talked about earlier, is making sure you really understand and have all the information about what it is they're asking you to do in the application. Those 13 dimensions and like how much, it's really emphasized a lot, but it is important. And I think, showing your application that you understand what they mean and how you can demonstrate them is very important. Also, sending your application to people you trust, variety to read over, make sure there's no spelling errors, but also kind of those other tips that you got earlier. Is this concise? Can anyone kind of understand what my contribution was, or what the output, or what became of this example that you're using in your application. So those are just a few things that I recall that helped me out when I was in the process.
And with the interview, Zena, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so for the interview, at the time I was an undergrad and everybody was kind of interviewing for all types of stuff, consulting jobs, whatever, what have you. I mean, kind of like how public speaking is a general important, skill, you can practice with almost anyone. I remember I did contact the diplomat in residence who gave me some useful examples of, ways to practice, but I also practiced with roommates, with other people, maybe it's not the specific content of State Department, but just having that practice and really kind of getting dressed in the part and putting yourself in that mindset in place to be presenting your best self as a practice before getting to the interview stage.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Camila, did you want to add anything to that question?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say with the application process, and I'm seeing, some questions even come up about, I'm not, like you said, a political science major or political science or international relations major, apologies. But I want to apply. So the best thing to do is really find ways to adapt the dimensions to your current situation. It doesn't matter if you were an international relations major or not. It's all about having that flexibility and adaptability to those 13 dimensions. So make sure that you include that in your personal statement. And I mean, it's called a personal statement for a reason, right? They want to know your story, be you. So I would say that was like the biggest part that I took from the application process. And then on the interview side, my diplomat in residence was kind enough to set up 3 mock interviews for me. And I will tell you, I definitely needed them. So, try and have, if you can find either a diplomat in residence or someone that you wouldn't mind doing like a mock interview simulation, those are always great. I would say take the dimensions and for every single one, have one example prepared, because during the interview, they might ask you, this dimension, adaptability, please give us an example of when you were adaptable. So if you have that already at the top of your head, you don't have to worry, right? You're not scrambling, you are prepared. You can be a little more poised. Of course, you're going to be nervous, but I always say the more prepared, the better. But even once again, in your interview, be you. I always say that I think one of the reasons I got in is because I made my interviewers laugh during my interview. And sometimes, it really is just about being you, about obviously reading the room correctly, but at the end of the day, stay true to you. Yep.
Thank you, Camila. Antoinette.
All right, and because Camila mentioned the great prep work that she had done and the folks who she enlisted to help her with that, I do also want to mention, because I see one of my scholarship advisor colleagues has joined us for this session, that the scholarship advisors at your schools, whether you're an alumni, go back to your undergrad, or if you're a scholarship advisor, use them as well. They, like us, are paid to do this work of engaging with students, and they want to see you succeed, and so they can be a wonderful resource for you as well. And just looking at the time, we'll go ahead and move on to our next speaker. And I know that there will be some questions for these 2 wonderful panelists who have shared with us so far. So we will come back to them with some questions a little bit later. But next, I'd like to introduce Robert Pettish, who is the Howard University Deputy Director of the Pickering Fellowship Program. So he is in the know. He is in the loop. He is out there as part of the team that is administering these fellowships on behalf of the State Department. And he is going to talk a bit about this topic of preparation and how do you prepare a competitive application. So Robert, I will turn it over to you. And then, because I do see a couple more questions and a hand raised, just to let you know, those of you who have questions, after Robert concludes his tips, then we'll open it up for some Q&A, picking some from the chat and some for live questions as well. So Robert, if I could turn it over to you now, and thank you for being with us.
No, thank you for providing this platform, and thank you. And I'm very excited for everyone that has decided to apply for the fellowships and go down that international road. My background, I am not an FSO. However, my background is in NGO work, global development, and I've worked on a number of State Department programs that took me to Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, and other programs. And I've always considered myself somewhat of a catalyst for people like you to get to the next level to where you want to be and become foreign service officers and giving back to the country on a volunteer basis. So thank you so much. So we covered a lot with Mignon and Internet as far as the application is concerned. I do want to tighten up just a bit about just some processes that you need and make sure that you have all the stuff that you need to complete the application. So let's just start at the beginning. Number one, make sure that you have all the materials that the application requires, right? You need your proof of citizenship. That's either going to be your passport or your birth certificate. We do not need these officially, but they need to be uploaded into your application. Make sure that they are not expired. If it's the birth certificate, we're going to need to see that it has a stamp from your actual state. You can use an unofficial version when you upload them to your application. However, if you are selected to become a finalist, we will need to see those official versions before the actual interview takes place. Um, Also, transcripts, right? If you have attended a university or institution where you've earned 6 credits or more, you definitely want to provide that as well. So it doesn't matter if you went to a community college and you have an A degree, which is great. I attended community college. If you got your master, you already have a master's degree, right? That is not a disqualifier, but we definitely need to see any transcript that you have earned more than 6 credits. Now, being that there's a lot of individuals here that already have a lot of international experience, if you have gone to an international university, international institute, and those credits don't appear on the degree granting institute transcript, you want to provide to those separately. And if they are in a foreign language, we do request that you provide translation for them. So all of those elements make for a complete application, right? Your proof of citizenship, your transcript, any institute that you went to and you earned 6 or more credits. These are things that sometimes may be stumbling blocks for individuals, but we want to make sure that you have everything that you need to make your application complete and eligible. And being that the application for Rangel isn't due until the 22nd and the Pickering isn't due until the 29th, you still have time to gather all your materials. So those are just some basic things. And one more thing, that 3-point GPA, there's really not a whole lot of flexibility in that. Just to be very upfront with you, that's one of the obligations that we must have to have you in the program, as well as if you're selected to be in the program, that you maintain that 3.2 GPA. So those are going to be your eligibility requirements. Just moving on from that to go back into what Mignon was talking about, your letters of recommendation. So that's another thing. You want to start, if you have not started already, start that conversation now. Don't wait until the week before the application is due or 2 days before. You want to be respectful of those individuals' time and also your time to make sure that they've composed really strong letters of recommendations for you, right? You need those too. One from an academic background or someone from your community to make sure that they understand who you are as an individual, that they understand your leadership potential, the impact that you've had, as Mignon said, and then also that they can speak to what are some growing points for you, right? Are you a strong writer? Do you improve on that? Because there's also a form associated with the letters of recommendation where your recommender is going to fill out a form. So one more thing about letters of recommendation. It does not matter the title of the individual. That's not so important. Oftentimes we've seen where applicants want to go to their congressman, senator, or I did an internship at the White House. That's fine. However, to build a strong application and make you more competitive, just be sure that that individual can truly speak to those cores of what the program speaks to, your leadership potential, your motivation, things of that nature. And also remember, all these items need to be in the application at the due date, right? So sometimes if you reach out to someone that is very high up or they're very busy, those things may not come in on time. So you may want to have a backup, but don't focus so much on the title or things of that nature. Just make sure that that individual can speak to you and who you are and that they understand what you're doing. So start those conversations now. So collect your letters of recommendation, make sure you have your materials for your application, and make sure you start to communicate with your recommenders right now. Now to the personal statement. Another thing that we also like to recommend on top of those 13 dimensions is the career track quiz. So go in there and take this career track quiz, see what those cones are about, see what you fit into. And then once again, that this needs to make sense for the selection panel, that your whole application as a whole has context for them. And then once again, that you thought about this, what are your motivators? Are you truly dedicated to public service? To make sure that this application almost reads like a story for you as an individual, right? So make sure you start to look at those things right now as you move through this process. So one more thing that I want to reinforce about the personal statement This is like a writing sample, the personal statement and the financial statement, right? So you have, once again, you have time. Write it again, write several versions. Make sure that it's grammatically correct, that the structure is correct, that you have some strong, complex sentences in there. But this is your first introduction to the selection panel and them getting to know who you are, right? So make sure that you adhere to those things and you should be on the right track. As far as support goes as well, you do have your DIRs. You have a long laundry list of individuals. On our website, you can also have one-on-one sessions with one of our senior advisors. Currently, we have 3 on staff who are senior FSOs. You can also speak to one of the directors. So we like to say that our support starts from application all the way through A100, and we always have time for you. So once again, you have time and you always have support. Okay, so on with the financial statement. So the same with the financial statement. That's another writing sample. Even though shorter, you only have 400 words, you want to make sure all these things tie together and they provide context for your background, your motivations, and for the selection panel, right? So for that financial statement, what we did not bring up is, yes, you must complete a FAFSA. Then the FAFSA will generate your SAR, and then you will have what's called an EFC, or expected family, EFC, your expected family contribution. So that's going to tell you, based on your the information that you've submitted to the Department of Education on your FAFSA, where you are and what your expected family income is. So that's where you have a little bit of flexibility in saying, my expected family income is this. It ties into your financial statement in a way, right? You're providing a demonstrated need for support for graduate school. So that's all that is. It's kind of like a normalizer for everyone. Then we also request that you have a letter of financial support from your university. If you don't have one, that's fine, but you can submit it. It's not a required thing, but we do request it. So this is where you're going to demonstrate where you had Pell Grants, if you received any of your local scholarships. It just supports, once again, the aid that you received while you were getting your education. So also in this part, I would like to add that we do have a high population of, not high, but a notable population of individuals that they've come into the fellowship with already some work experience, right? They've already completed a master's degree or they've completed a bachelor's degree some time ago. The FAFSA still will be required for you, but those are also a group of individuals that we are seeking to recruit as well. And that leads me into the employment section, right? So put down any employment experience that you have that's relevant to the Foreign Service or relevant to the application. Once again, that's another way by producing your CV, your work experience, your honors, things that you on the dean's list. You're building that personal story. It's all related to your personal statement, and you're creating context for the selection panel for them to make the decision about bringing you on as a future Foreign Service officer. So with that, I will turn it back over to Antoinette, and we can go into questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert, for all those tips. I know those were super helpful for those who are listening. I appreciate it. So now we will go ahead and move into the Q&A portion. And we're going, just for those of you who are wondering, we are going to an hour and a half for this session to allow enough time for Q&A and folks to get their questions in. So I will ask Robert for some assistance in answering the first batch of questions. I'll give sort of some of my top line thoughts, but definitely turn to Robert for the details. We have a lot of questions on the master's degree. So I'll summarize real quick a bunch of questions we have on that issue. What if I already have a master's? What if I'm a junior and I'm not yet applying to a master's? What if my bachelor's degree was not in an area related to the Foreign Service? What about a master's degree at an overseas institution? Can I apply if I'm not currently enrolled in a master's program, and are remote master's programs eligible? So I'll just say a couple of things here, and Robert, then please offer the nitty-gritty as it comes down to this. If you already have a master's and you're going to get another master's, that is fine. You do just have to be pursuing a 2-year master's program. There is the opportunity to do a combined bachelor's and master's program. I'll let Robert get into the details of that because I don't want to misspeak, but I know it is possible. Also, with respect to, what if my bachelor's is not in an area of foreigns related to the Foreign Service? That's fine, as long as the master's degree that you will be pursuing is in an area related to the Foreign Service. That's all that's required. Master's degree from an overseas institution. If you'll recall the eligibility slide that was up a little bit earlier, you do have to be pursuing a 2-year master's program at a US institution in order to be eligible. Can I apply even if I'm not enrolled currently in a master's degree? As long as you are seeking, for the application that's open right now, as long as you are seeking, going to be applying this fall to a master's degree program that will start in fall 2023, that is fine. So as long as you will be starting your master's program in fall 2023, that is fine. On the remote programs, it's my understanding that if it's a strictly online program, that's not eligible, but I'll let Robert confirm that. And then Robert, there was also a question on how involved is Howard in the selection of a fellows, 1, school, and then 2, in their particular degree program at that school. So Robert, anything that you could offer on those groups of questions, that would be wonderful.
Sure, thank you very much. I will start in reverse to answer your question about how involved is Howard in the process. So once you've been selected as a fellow, and you will know by December. If it's for Rangel, you'll know by November. For Pickering, you'll know by December. So you have plenty of time to get into those graduate school applications. And once again, we have 3 senior advisors that are on staff that serve as guides and provide you information about which programs are best suited for you. But then we also address the individual, right? Like what kind of graduate school what kind of graduate experience do you want to have? Do you want to be in DC? Do you want to be in North Carolina? Do you want to stay close to home like Texas? So it's a really comprehensive process for our advisors to provide you guidance in selecting a graduate school. And along that, the program must be approved by one of the senior advisors. So you have time, but they'll give you quite a lot of guidance on getting there. And so we have a lot of support in that. As far as you are correct, the institution must be US based. Let's say if you decide on a program, like say John Hopkins SAIS, where they have a campus in Taiwan, and they have a campus in Bologna, and they have a campus in Spain, that's absolutely fine. If you want to have that graduate school experience when you are abroad, that's totally possible, and that's something we would talk to one of our advisors about. There was one more question that you said, Antoinette, about
what if I already have a master's degree?
Yeah, if you have a master's degree already, that's absolutely fine. Just like Antoinette said, I just want to reinforce that you should be seeking to start a master's degree in 2023 in the fall. And it must be something that is relevant to the Foreign Service, and it needs to be a different degree.
And then I'll take one more question from the chat, and then I'll turn it over to Mignon to start to address some live questions. So in the chat, and Robert, I'll also turn to you for your advice on this. It was asked, how is financial need determined? Is it determined by just the FAFSA? Now you started to get into this when you talked about that just a moment ago. Any additional thoughts you want to offer to folks on this?
It's determined by the FAFSA, but also your financial statement, right? So it's based on the EFC. So once again, I'll go back. So you submit your FAFSA, which will generate the SAR. And then the SAR will produce what's called the EFC. So this is a number which is your financial contributions from your family, right? Based on that number, it's assigned a point or a number of points, and that's how the selection committee that's how we normalize that, how everyone is assigned a score based on that. So if, let's say, for example, if you have a high EFC, right, you may have, that's what the financial statement part is for, because you will have a chance to, once again, provide your motivations and your demonstrated need for financial support for graduate school that is unique to you, right? Everybody's number is going to be different. Everyone didn't receive a Pell Grant. Everyone, your family may have a higher EFC. So once again, that's what that financial statement is for. So you provide context of all the content in your application. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, now we'll turn to a couple of live questions. Mignon, over to you.
Thank you, Antoinette. Antoinette, there was one question that I saw in the chat about sort of the internships, your abroad internship and your domestic internship. I'm wondering if you guys as the panelists would like to speak to the internships and how they're selected.
I can.
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Robert. That's fine.
Okay, awesome. So you have both on the Rangel and the Pickering. So on the Pickering side, you will have a domestic internship that you'll perform at the Department of State in Washington, D.C. We'll fly you out, train you out, provide you with your lodging and or support for lodging. And we also give you a stipend to support you. And then you have your overseas. So the Wrangel's perform the congressional internship, and we also support for lodging and bringing you out as far as travel. Now, what we do is we have a great program manager on the Hill, and they perform a matching process for those who will be going on the Hill. And based on your interest, based on the interest of the office and the need of the office, on the Pickering side, it's an application. You decide if you are more interested in a regional office or a functional bureau, or if you want to be in the office of the secretary, you've got interest in security or Africa. It's an application, and then we do not manage that process. Our sponsors over in GTM, or General Talent Management, have a great internship team, and they take all of our applications, we put them together for you. But along the lines of support, so once again, once you fill out that application, by that time, you will be assigned a mentor and a peer mentor. So even if you don't understand the whole process or those offices, or what does a functional bureau mean, or do I want to be in Western Hemisphere or Africa, there's going to be, once again, those senior advisors on the Howard side. Then you're going to have your peer advisors and your senior FSO mentors that have at least 10 years of experience to guide you through the application process to make sure that you get some experience in the area that you're interested in. So I don't know if anyone on the panel wants to speak to that.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Robert. Camila, Zena, do you want to add anything about your experience with your internships?
Yeah, so at least for mine, I'll say for my international one, at first I was much more leaning toward, going to Latin America. But I actually chose, which thankfully Mignon actually convinced me a little bit to do, to go to the Africa region. So you can also take it as an opportunity to go to another region that maybe you never thought of serving in, and see how that goes for you. And as for the domestic ones, I would just say you can either, like we said, choose a functional or a regional one, but really think about kind of what you want that experience to give to you. So for me, I did an internship in the Western Hemisphere Affairs Public Diplomacy Officer, because at that time I had not chosen my career path yet, but I knew that I was leaning toward public diplomacy. So once I did the internship, I said, signed, sealed, delivered. This is a track for me. But the internship helped me do that. So definitely think about career-wise where you want to see it go. And your internship can either affirm that for you or maybe have you look at different avenues.
Great. Zena, was that your experience as well?
Yep. Yeah, very similar. And I think I would just add that the ability to kind of get experience, like Camila was saying, get your feet wet, try out a track, try out a region. It's such an advantage really going into the State Department once you do start your career to have that opportunity. And there's lots of different avenues into the State Department and the Foreign Service, but I think that's something really unique. And it really is so beneficial to kind of have that chance to learn a bit about what it's actually like working on the Hill in the case of Rangel Fellows or at a consulate or embassy overseas.
Great, thank you, Zena, for that. We're going to move into a couple of live questions. I had a chance to communicate with Isaac, and his first question was really just about where can you locate your diplomat in resident. Isaac is living in the Philippines. He's been in China for over 7 years. And so we placed that link in the chat for Antoinette and I, who are diplomats in residence. We have colleagues who were placed all around the United States. Please get in touch with us. You can email us. You can participate in our virtual office hours. We might be at a campus near you as well, because we do lots of travel. Next, I'm going to open it up for Kayla Moore to ask her question. Kayla, tell us what school you're representing, and please tell us your question.
So hi, everybody. I'm representing Virginia State University. And my question was, are there extra avenues that we can explore once we get into the State Department, or would you be stuck in one lane? So are there multiple jobs that you could do, or would you be stuck on one job career path for the rest of your time? And
that's a great question. Antoinette, do you want to take that question?
Sure. So with the Pickering and the Rangel fellowships, these fellowships are to become what are called Foreign Service Officers, Foreign Service Officer Generalists, diplomats in our diplomatic corps. So with this career, as I mentioned at the very beginning, while we're generalists, there are still one of five career tracks that you are asked to select: the political, management, economic, consular, and public diplomacy. So you will select, and that's the career track quiz that folks were mentioning earlier. That's also, the link is in the chat. So you will need to select one of those career tracks as a successful Pickering or Rangel Fellow. Something you'll probably want to talk about in your application materials as well, what you're drawn to, what you're interested in. But you'll need to select one of those tracks by the time you join the State Department. You will be expected to spend a good amount of time focused on that career track. But there is also the opportunity, because we're generalists, to do different types of work. So I started my career as a political officer. I did political work, I did consular work. I changed about halfway through my career to do public diplomacy work. So I changed my career track. And while it's possible, it's a very complex process. So do be sure that you've thought very carefully about the career track that you are choosing, because in all likelihood, that is the area of focus that you'll be having. But because we are generalists, the department also encourages us to do what are called out-of-cone excursions. So do a management tour, do an economic tour, get that experience, get that fulsome perspective of the work that we do, so that you can be more effective in your particular career track. So there is the opportunity to do different assignments, but you will be expected to select one career track and mostly focus on that career track.
Great, thank you, Antoinette.
Antoinette, sorry,
Oh,
if I can just quickly add, yeah, just as a reminder, so that people know, when you are an entry-level officer, you actually have to do a consular tour. So regardless of what track you pick, you will have to do a consular tour. So maybe that is your dive into something new, but that is a requirement for the entry-level officers. You do have to complete at least one tour in the consular field.
That's a good add, Camila. Thank you for that. I saw Ninel's hand up next, so I'm going to unmute her. Please tell us what school you're representing and jump in with your question.
Hi, everyone. I am representing University of California, Berkeley, and my question was about acceptance rate. And you also mentioned that you're encouraging students to apply from marginalized communities, and I wonder if it includes student parents, as I am a student parent.
Robert, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think that once again, we are looking for individuals, right? And some of us have, or some of the applicants have definitely multi-layers of backgrounds that would include them to be individuals just like as you are. And I think that's something that you want to speak to in your personal statement when we're all talking about being, which everyone kind of touched on, being authentic and putting your whole individual self in the application. So absolutely.
And Nell, as someone who has a young child at home, kudos to you, because it is not easy. So I just want to throw that out there. My next question was from Robert. Let's see here. I see Pedro. I'm sorry, Pedro Rodriguez. Pedro, I'm unmuting you. Please tell us where you attend school and your question.
Thank you. And I'm with the University of Florida, as you can see, Go Gators. And I had a few questions, so I want to dive right in. I wanted to ask about the transition process from the fellowship, if I'm completing the fellowship, to being a service officer full-time with the State Department. Is there a process for transitioning or a likelihood of being a full-time service officer afterwards? And then I was also going to ask about the length of the tours in the fellowship. How long would that be? If it conflicts with college or completing college in time, and as well as if we have a choice in whether we want to take management or economic tours.
Sure. So Pedro, a lot of these questions are good logistical questions. So just to make sure we're clarifying, because we've been giving you lots of information, you'll apply for the fellowship as a senior or a recent graduate. The fellowship will provide those 2 years per academic year of funding for your graduate school studies. During that time, you're not working as a Foreign Service officer. You are just in school, you are just studying your master's degree. You can be preparing to take the Foreign Service officer test during this time. And so that's typically what we do. We provide mentorship for you during that time, and you're just studying while you're in school. After your first and second year of graduate school, you will then take those 2 summer internships that are paid, one domestically in Washington and one overseas. And you do have some say in where you go in those fellowships, as in those internships, as Robert mentioned. Once you complete your second summer internship and you completed all the requirements for your master's program, you are then able to start in the orientation class for what we call our orientation class, or our training to join as a Foreign Service officer. In this time, you have had an opportunity to go through a security background check, a medical clearance, to make sure you're eligible to continue on in a career in the Foreign Service. So you're not working as a Foreign Service officer while you are in school. You are just studying. That doesn't start until after you complete your master's degree, all the requirements for your master's degree, and that second summer internship. And you did ask about the length of the tours, and I think you're discussing the length of the summer internships. Is that what your question? Okay, Robert, did you want to speak to the length for the summer internship?
Both are 10 weeks. Congressional is 10 weeks, domestic as well as overseas.
Okay, thanks, Pedro, for allowing us to clarify all of that. Kamal, you are next up. Please tell us where you're going to school and your question.
Oh, yes. Hi, everybody. Hi. Thanks so much, Megan, and thanks for your time, and thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Yes, I suppose from my understanding, I'm not maybe eligible since I have already finished my master's degree in international relations. It was at the Harvard Extension School, and this was last year. So am I not eligible for both fellowships, I suppose? Unless I apply for another master, correct?
You got it. That's absolutely right.
I see. And what's available out there for someone like me then? If you don't mind me asking.
Sure. Antoinette, do you want to jump in here and talk about some of the student programs that might be eligible for Kamal?
Sure. For a lot of the student programs, you do have to be in current student status. So whether that's a certificate program or another advanced degree, you've already got one, so you're probably not looking to get that. But so probably fewer opportunities on the student program side, but on the career side, depending on what your major is, on what your focus is, you could just go through the regular application process to becoming a Foreign Service officer. The first step is the Foreign Service officer test, which is a written exam. On careers.state.gov, you can find out sort of how you can register for that exam and what all is involved in preparing an application. We also have Foreign Service specialist positions. So I talked a bit about how Foreign Service officers are generalists. We'll work on a number of issues across our career. We also have what are called Foreign Service specialists. These, as the name suggests, are folks that are hired for specialized educational background or work experience. So these are folks like our engineers, our IT folks, our doctors, our law enforcement personnel, and others like that. We actually do have a fellowship program for those getting their master's in IT, if that is of interest to anyone. And then also there's the civil service, which is our domestic workforce. And you would go to usajobs.gov to do a search as to which civil service positions are available at the State Department right now to apply for. But that's another career track that you might want to pursue.
Sure. Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you.
Sure. And Kamal, I would just jump in and say, in addition to that, take a look at the Presidential Management Fellowship. This is an opportunity for folks with advanced degrees to have a year to 2 years in Washington doing mentorship, and it's paid. It's a fellowship that's paid for you to relocate to Washington for that time and really work with a policy office. You might also, if you have Arabic, Mandarin.
Actually, I speak 5 languages altogether.
Fantastic. Well, if you are a heritage or proficient speaker in Arabic, Mandarin, Portuguese, or Spanish, you might be interested in a program called the Consular Fellows Program. This is a limited non-career appointment program that allows you to work in U.S. embassies for up to 5 years. That could be up to 2 different tours, 2 different assignments, and you would be serving on the visa window, so making judgment calls if a foreigner is eligible to travel to the United States. So that Consular Fellows Program is a fantastic opportunity. You get the Black passport, all the benefits of being a U.S. diplomat. Your housing is paid for, as Antoinette mentioned. So definitely, if you have that Arabic, take a look at that program.
Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you so much to all of you. Nice to meet you, and thanks again.
And Danielle, I'll take this opportunity, if I could, to mention another program, a plug for something that just launched. So for those who already have a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree, we just launched, by the Secretary of State himself just launched it a few weeks ago, something called the Colin Powell Leadership Program. There was a question in the chat about, are there fellowships for the civil service? Great question. Yes. With the launch of this program, there is. So the Colin Powell Leadership Program is for individuals who want opportunities in the civil service, which is that domestic workforce, mostly at our headquarters in Washington, D.C., but also some positions across the U.S. So with the Colin Powell Leadership Program, it's focused on the civil service, and there are two components. One is the internship program that's for undergrads who are pursuing a bachelor's, and then the other is the fellowship program. So if you're a recent college grad, again, with a bachelor's or an advanced degree within the last 2 years, so you do have to have graduated with that degree within the last 2 years, and you had at least a 3.2 GPA, you can apply for that fellowship program. Now, because these are so new, these are not yet on careers.state.gov, but they will be sort of in the coming days, at most weeks. And we're anticipating that this will be open, the Colin Powell Leadership Program, both the internship and fellowship program will be open for application in early October. So do come back in another week or two to careers.state.gov if that's of interest to you, to take a look at that program.
Thank you, Antoinette. That's so important. So we have a little bit of time left. I wish I could get to everyone. I'm going to go next to Miran. Miran, if you can tell us where you're in school and your question quickly, and then we'll move on to maybe one or two more questions. There you go. Are you able to speak now? Are you unmuted on your end?
There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm from St. Cloud State University, and I'm studying international relations right now, but formerly I was studying nursing. So I've done internships with Mayo Clinic and other medically related internships, but I haven't done any with the political service, and I'm wondering how that's going to affect how my commitment is viewed during the application process and how I can mitigate that.
That's a good question. Robert, Camila, Zena, all of you might have some thoughts on how she can transition from that field into diplomacy.
Zena, Camila, I'm gonna take a stab at it, or unless you wanna go for it. All right, sure. So it's great you have the nursing background, health. So of course you will be going into a new a new master's degree program, right? But even as you put that into your application, you can say that I'm going to apply for a master's program, and I'm interested in one that has a health element or that has health policy elements already built into it, and that'll play directly into your nursing background. So you don't have to sacrifice one for another, just that one's gonna come out into the forefront a little bit more. So you're absolutely on track with that. So thank you for your question.
Absolutely. And I would say if you think about economic officers who are foreign service officers, they are looking at the environment abroad in that host country to see if it's conducive for U.S. businesses. And so they're also looking at climate change, at malaria, at HIV/AIDS rates, at the water crisis in South Africa was something our economic officers were looking at. So they can let US businesses know if this is a good time to bring their business to that country, and also working with foreign businesses to do more trade with the United States. So the economic officer track might be a good field for someone with a health background. Fantastic. You're welcome. Kalia, jump on in. What school do you go to and your question?
Hi, I'm Kalia. I'm just graduated from the University of California in Santa Barbara, and I'm going to be starting a Peace Corps tour very soon. So I was wondering, since I'm looking into applying to the Pickering and Rangel fellowships while I'm there to do the fellowship once I return, I was wondering if that affects any of the financial statements or what it would be like completing the FAFSA from abroad, which kinds of things apply in my situation, and it gets kind of murky there.
Robert, I'll hand that question over to you.
If you want to apply for the 2023 cycle and you're currently going on a Peace Corps, in the Peace Corps, all the normal application and eligibility rules would apply to you, even though you would be abroad. I think the advantage that you have is that if you are selected as a finalist, everything will be completely remote this year. So you could, if you complete the application and had all of your items in, then you would be able to interview while you were abroad or while you're on your post, which is absolutely just fine. We had a lot of those being that we've been remote. That has been the norm for the last couple of years. So you do have that to your advantage. As far as the financials are concerned, you would still complete the FAFSA and fill out your financial statement. That would just be the same.
Thank you, Robert. So now we're going to go to our last and final question. I'm going to ask Sadie to please tell us where she's from and your question.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sadie and I'm representing UCLA. I was reading the facts online and I saw that both fellowships will sort of be taking into account like the impact of the pandemic on like a student's application. And I guess I was sort of wondering like how understanding, I guess, especially like as a student who graduated a year early. So most of my undergraduate experience was during the pandemic. So a lot of like my chances to take internships or maybe to like step up my community, like all of that was sort of hindered because of like, you know, CDC guidelines and things like that. So I guess I was just sort of wondering what you think the sort of like leeway would be. And thank you, by the way.
It's a very timely question for Robert or Antoinette to sort of share their thoughts on that.
I can go for it. Yeah, so if you think about it, the selection panel members, this is their third time completing this process virtually, right? And so that has been the common practice that you may not have, a lot of individuals may not have so much in-person volunteer experience or in-person study abroad or in-person activities, or they've done their entire college process or education online. That's fine. Put it in the personal statement. I'm pretty sure there's a way that you can demonstrate that you may have been a leader in other capacities, show your leadership potential or your motivations. All those other core elements just don't change because they were virtual. So our selection committee is well versed in the climate that we're in to make sure that you get the same amount of attention on your application as everyone else does. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sadie, for that final question. I see some additional hands and I wish we could get to everyone at this time. I'm going to pass it back to Antoinette for a few words, and then we will pass it to our panelists for some final advice and tips as you apply for the Pickering and Rangel fellowships. And then we'll conclude our program. But no, this isn't the last time you'll see us. We will have lots of programs just like this, and we are always here as diplomats and residents at your disposal. So Antoinette, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So yes, I do just want to reiterate what we've added in the chat a couple of times is if you do want to continue the conversation, talk more about what could be a right fit, whether it's the fellowships or internships or something, or careers, something else, please do reach out to your regional diplomat in residence. So that link has been put in the chat a couple of times. Maybe if one of my colleagues could throw it in the chat again, just so it's at the top of everyone's viewing. Please do reach out to whoever it is that covers your region to have that conversation and get some of those questions answered so that we can continue and help get you where you need to go. But I did just want to say generally, thank you so much to all of our panelists who have joined us today. Amazing folks, amazing stories, so inspirational. We can see from the chat that you've inspired not only your co-hosts, Mignon and I, but also the folks who have joined today, the 240 something folks who joined today at one point. So we're really happy and grateful for all of you that you joined. But I know we've got one last question, and Mignon has one last question for you all about some advice that you might give to those who are on the call. So I'll turn it over to her to ask you for that last piece of advice and to conclude. Thank you.
That's exactly right, Antoinette. So Zena and Camila, these individuals are now working on their applications. They are busy trying to meet that September 22nd deadline for Rangel and September 29th deadline for Pickering. Let's start with Ms. Zena. What would you advise to them in this sort of hectic, nervous stage of completing the application? What should they keep in mind?
I think what Camila said earlier about being true to yourself in terms of the content of what you're writing, you know, really kind of try to break free from this potential thought that there is a certain type of person that's a diplomat, because that's just not true. And also just keeping, you know, that checklist going over multiple times. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of requirements, but, you know, if you go onto the website, just cross-check and just make sure it's all there, because it would be a shame to be missing something that would, you know, potentially interfere. So best of luck to all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Zena. And Camila?
I would say, number one, do not be afraid to ask for help. And I will say that even in our career as diplomats, I mean, I reach out to Mignon and Antoinette on a pretty regular basis sometimes when I need help. So in this application, ask for help. Try and look at as many resources as you can and have an inner deadline, right? Make sure that you keep yourself on track. And yeah, like Zena said, just tell us your story. Tell us your story and you know, you might not make it this year, apply again. There are so many opportunities to work in the State Department. And, you know, we need people, we need good people. So don't be discouraged, you know, go for that application and don't be afraid. Like Zina said, we look very different. We all look very different in the State Department, and that's a good thing because we get to, you know, really live in a society where there's so many different perspectives, different voices, and different people at the table. So good luck.
Thank you, Camila. And Deputy Director Robert, we were so lucky to have you on the virtual call. I think we have to allow you to say a few words to all the applicants and candidates as well.
And thank you all again. And I just want to double down and co-sign up with Zina and Camila say about being your authentic self, right? The selection panels are composed of senior foreign officers, retired ambassadors, executives from the committee. These individuals know authenticity, and in a program that is seeking diversity in many different ways, this is one chance you get to be yourself. So put it in there. It's okay. And once again, the 22nd, 29th, you have time. Do not get choked up on a technical thing like you don't have your SAR completed or didn't do your FAP. Get those things out of the way. So take your time, seek help, but don't get caught up in a technical thing. And then also, we want all of you. So once again, just be authentic. We have time. Thank you.
Thank you for those motivational words, Robert, and to everyone who joined us today. Antoinette and I are so happy to have had this opportunity to talk to you. These fellowships completely changed our lives. The ability, as Camila said, to be able to work abroad, to be able to build global partnerships, to have financial stability and job stability and be serving in a way that is serving the US government and the world, it is an incredible opportunity. And so we hope to see each of you at a US embassy or consulate abroad. I want to give a huge shout out to Antoinette, who helped organize today's program. She has a number of interns who are virtual student interns for the Foreign Service who've been placing diligently links in the chat. And so shout out to those interns. I think we have Kim, we have Megan, we have Camila. Thank you guys for all of your help. To Camila and to Zina, to all of you who have had a chance to see them, you're just going to expect great things from them. The next secretaries of state, the next presidents are, I see Antoinette saying presidents, are here on this panel. Guys, there are a couple of things we want to keep encouraging you to think about. That the deadlines, again, September 22nd for Rangel, September 29th for Pickering. Also, keep an eye out on careers.state.gov. We have the 2023 summer internship program. It's paid, it's available for undergraduate students and for recent graduates. Make sure you're watching careers.state.gov for those application announcements that will open in the next couple of weeks, sometime in late October, early November. There's also the Rangel Summer Enrichment Program, which will be opening soon for applications. And we just want to keep flagging that careers.state.gov. It's your #1 resource, along with your diplomats and residents like Antoinette and I. We are here for all of you. So at this time, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We really are excited to see you abroad, and don't be invisible. That's what an ambassador told me. You want to make sure you are not invisible in your academic career, show those leadership skills, show that impact, really make a difference. Antoinette, any final words?
Just reiterate again something that Zina said that so resonated with me when I was 19 applying to this program. Don't rule yourself out because you think a diplomat looks a certain way or comes from a certain background or from a certain experience. Look at all of us on the panel here today, and even so many of our colleagues. Everyone can be a diplomat. I mean, the United States is one of the most egalitarian sort of ways of becoming a diplomat. You don't even have to have a bachelor's degree if you're applying to be a foreign service officer. But take the lessons and the stories that were shared with you today to see yourself in this role, whether it's through the Pickering and Rangel Fellowship or through other opportunities, internships, other careers. But know that you, representing, as Robert said, your authentic self, brings something unique and special to this. And we really do need all of those skills and all of those experiences. So see yourself with us.
And with that, we'll say, have a good evening, best of luck on the applications, and we look forward to seeing you all abroad. Take care.
So much. Have a great rest of your night. Bye.